Of course, the Premier's reaction is quite often to dismiss and ridicule and redirect, and that's the problems we have. In order to build trust with Albertans, we need to be straight with them, and we need to be able to.
Hello everyone, Nadine Wellwood, and I'm here today with MLA Todd Loewen to discuss the letter that was posted just a few days ago. And you've been a busy man ever since there, Mr. Loewen.
Yes, definitely lots of interest in that letter, and of course it did raise some interest across the province. I think a lot of people are reaching out from all across the province and wanting to talk about that letter and what it means going forward.
Yeah, so if it's okay today, what I want to do is actually take this letter and break it down a little bit for our viewers, because you didn't mince words in many ways. For a man of few words, it said an awful lot.
Yeah, so, I'm not normally one to drag things out when I'm trying to explain something, and so I did, of course, get to the point on that letter very quickly, and I did express a lot of the frustrations that I feel, and I think a lot of Albertans feel.
Now, before we get to the letter, though, this is a little atypical behavior for you, from what I understand from some of your colleagues. And you know what? This came out at midnight, roughly. And, were you hoping that it wasn't going to raise as much attention as it did? Or why so late?
It's just a matter of trying to get it done and get it out. Of course, there was a lot of thought and a lot of anxiety on my own part, of course, doing something like that. And so, you want to make sure you do it right and get the words right and make sure that you're expressing exactly how you feel and exactly how Albertans feel. And that's what I felt I was doing. So I wanted to be careful as I went and proceeded with that. And of course, what it was on the eve of the cancellation of the second caucus meeting that the Premier canceled, and it was, I think that was kind of a culmination of the situation. We know we're in a serious situation right now across Alberta, and people are worried and concerned about things. And we have a Premier that's canceling the opportunity for MLAs to be able to speak to government, listen to explanations from ministers and from the Premier himself. And so shutting down that opportunity basically is shutting down a large portion of democracy. And because MLAs, they have caucuses that time for them to express their views and listen to government direction.
So was this a sort of a snap decision that you made and you just kind of reached that boiling point and you made it happen? Or was this something that was brewing for some time? Who did you consult, or was this truly just your decision to make?
Well, obviously, it was my decision to make, but it's something that had been brewing for a long time, for about the last year and a half. I think there's been a lot of frustration in caucus, and myself included, of course, with how this Premier has been treating caucus and treating input from caucus members. And so this was, this had been brewing for a while, but obviously, in the end, it was just kind of the last day or two where I really realized that I had to do something. Obviously we need something to drastically change in Alberta right now because of the situation we're in. And obviously if the election was held today, the NDP would win, and that's unacceptable. We have to get things turned around. We have to get that direction changed as quick as possible. And so I felt, okay, he's finally pushed it just too far by basically removing caucus's opportunity to speak altogether.
Fantastic. So I'm going to jump into your letter here and highlight some of the key points. Obviously you were the UCP caucus chair, so it's not like you didn't hold a significant position within caucus. And you stated, I no longer believe that caucus can function properly. Meetings being canceled, decisions of government being made without notice to the members. Input as elected members are rarely considered. These are significant claims. Government doesn't function by one person, but a series of representatives.
It shouldn't. That's for sure. It should be the representatives having, at least a sizable say in how things proceed, and that's just not how it operates. We've seen multiple times when caucus has virtually everyone in caucus has spoken in one direction, and we've seen the premier take it the complete opposite direction. And of course, we've seen that more than once, and it continues to happen. And then, of course, there's lots of things that are just brought in, that we find out in the media at the same time as the Albertans find out. And so, obviously, there's no consultation at all in those cases. Never mind, maybe not listening to us going into a decision like that.
So this sounds to me more like it's become a Kenney government, ruled by one individual, not a government of Albertans ruled by their MLAs.
Yes, absolutely. It's basically a one-man show, and there's virtually nothing that happens in government that Premier Kenney doesn't have his fingers on.
So let's talk about leadership then, because obviously that's very disappointing. I mean, Kenney ran under unifying Albertans and conservative principles, and I feel personally his leadership has kind of come from a place of fear as opposed to confidence. What when you say you lack his confidence in his ability to lead, elaborate on that a little bit for us.
Well, I think a leader needs to be able to take input, and obviously the ultimate decisions sometimes are have to be relied on the leader to make. But obviously that there has to be some input, and there has to be a willingness to change direction when a majority of people are feeling something different. And I think we haven't seen that actually happen. And so there's many times I've heard even within cabinet meetings where everybody's going one direction, the leader just walks in and goes the opposite direction. And things like that are unacceptable. Like I say, I could see there's times when the tough decisions have to be made, and I appreciate that. But obviously, when the way it's been happening is just not acceptable. I think each of us as MLAs have to bring forward our views from our constituents, and bring forward those views that they need to be respected, listened to. And then, of course, at least at some point, acted upon those views.
So how has Kenney's really, in your opinion, failed Albertans in leading the province?
Well, I think there's multiple ways. We've seen multiple things that have been brought forward by this government, and then the government's had to completely reverse because they were mishandled. And we've seen things like one of the biggest issues is a fair treatment from Ottawa. We have the premier campaigned on that both in the leadership and in the election campaign on standing tough against Ottawa and representing Alberta on the federal stage. And I think the many constituents of mine have expressed that, and those expressions are coming from across Alberta, where the premier has failed in that regard.
So when I look at Jason Kenney, he comes from Ottawa. He's not, an Albertan. He comes from Ottawa. He's coming from the Conservative Party of Canada, under, all the way back to the days of Stockwell Day, Stephen Harper and throwing his support behind Scheer and O'Toole. Still, he's, although somewhat silent on O'Toole, who doesn't seem to be representing much of conservatism at all these days. Does Kenney, how does the polls are not showing that Albertans are backing or supporting his decisions, and yet he continues to just dig his heels in and go further down the same rabbit hole. Is this a mistake?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen, obviously he's incredibly unpopular in Alberta right now, and that's a result of his decisions and his direction. And Albertans just don't seem to trust him anymore. And I think that we've seen so many flip-flops and so many things that he said would happen, and they haven't. And so those directions are what's concerning Albertans, and that's exactly what it boils down to. It boils down to trust, and I think once you lose trust, then there's time to change direction, and obviously but you're right. It seems like the premier digs in his heels and then starts discrediting and lashing out against everybody around him.
Yeah, because he's actually come out and said that, he feels that he's done a good job and, he has the confidence of his caucus. And he proved that when he expelled both yourself and MLA Drew Barnes. And I don't think that's exactly how it happened that day. Maybe you can share a little bit about, the MLAs who did support you, but, again, you still managed to get expelled. So what's going on? Whose story is right here?
Well, again, nothing happens in government that Jason Kenney doesn't have his fingers on. He orchestrated the whole thing that day, right from investigating family members of mine, and bringing that forward in the caucus meeting. And so when things like that are happening, and then I heard the Peter on an interview suggest that he took a hands-off approach, and that's absolutely not true. He orchestrated the whole thing. The whole meeting was orchestrated right from the chair that was to take over, who in the past had actually opposed having a motion come forward in caucus. And then all of a sudden, the first thing that happened in that meeting was after the investigation was reported on, was a motion from a member that was entertained. And of course, the motion that was entertained was kicking myself and Drew Barnes out of caucus.
Which I want to touch on that for a quick second, because as I understand it, it was Peter Guthrie who put forward that motion. And interestingly enough, because of course Peter is in my riding here of Cochrane Airdrie, and he's published a tremendous number of articles about democracy and the importance of upholding democracy. And yet, you get a little bit of dissent and somebody who disagrees, and he happens to be the one to say, "Oh, they need to go."
Yeah, so no, that's a whole story in itself there that I probably won't get into right now. But so I mean that's how this kind of came down, and obviously again this was all orchestrated, and of course Jason Kenney he spoke very harshly about myself and Drew Barnes in that meeting, and so he says that nobody knew how he voted. But to be there in that room and suggest you didn't know would be absolutely disingenuous.
That doesn't happen in politics, disingenuous.
Oh, come on, yeah.
So you resigned because you wanted to speak freely. What are the issues that you wish to speak freely on?
I think there's so many issues in government right now, and obviously when we look back at some of the mistakes the government's made, we backtracked on. Of course, there's issues there. There's also again, and I probably keep bringing it up because it's so important. Is standing up to Ottawa and defending Alberta, and that hasn't been done. We need to be stronger there. Again, there's probably a myriad of things I would like to that I'd like to be working on. So.
Well, one of the things I've always said, if Alberta was serious about taking back its own provincial powers, the first thing that we have to do is control our own money. Jason Kenney has not, in my opinion, even addressed that issue, which to me, there's no point in talking about a police force or anything until we have to stop asking Ottawa for money. Yeah.
And we did have the Fair Deal panel, and it traveled around and gathered information across Alberta, and that was probably a good thing too. But of course, what comes after a panel is action, and we haven't seen that action. And I think we do need to move forward on things like that. It seems like with Premier Kenney, if he wants to do something, he does it, and if he doesn't want to do something, then he sets up a panel to talk about it. And there's some things we just need to act on, and we campaigned on many of those things, and we need to be working on those things moving forward.
Yeah, so you talk here about caucus obviously being dysfunctional. We've seen that, and you attribute that as a direct result of his lack of leadership. Messaging has been contradictory, confusing, and needlessly inflammatory. Are you talking about inside a caucus, or even the messaging that's going out to the public?
Actually, both. I mean, there's obviously things that happen within caucus where I think the language and the approach taken is far too abrasive for team building and trying to get people on side and working together. And I think we've seen that outside of caucus too, where for the Premier, likes to take shots at different people and different groups of people that probably aren't warranted. I think there's ways to approach people and talk to people that's far more constructive and get better results.
Now, I'm going to ask you for some specifics here because we've been talking very generic. But, you even mentioned here about the troubling economic crisis. I mean, we've got the highest unemployment. We've got small businesses that are, being bordered up. It's just, and worse yet, we come out with restrictions and rules and regulations. People comply with those restrictions, those rules, those regulations. They amend their businesses. I'm thinking build patios, only to find out 2 weeks later that they've gone through a huge expense, not only of both time and money, but now, this demoralization that's happening as well. How do we get out of this economic mess that we're in?
Well, I think we just need to start talking straight to Albertans, and we need to start explaining these details and things that we're working on. You pointed out a really good example as far as the outdoor patios and stuff like that. And right in my hometown, I had several different businesses, work on their patios, build patios, just so they could serve their customers outside. In fact, one Sunday afternoon, I had a little time, and I knew one of my local restaurateurs was working on his patio, and I thought, well, I'll just go give him a hand. So I gave him a couple hours hand on that, and then to watch him be shut down, it's demoralizing. I think these business owners deserve to be talked to straight, and so that they can be able to plan their businesses, plan their lives, and everything. It's just so frustrating to see these things happening, and that's where that frustrations come from, and that loss of trust that Albertans have in Jason Kenney.
And that's what I want to touch on is the trust, because, being ignored and dismissed. And it seems that Jason Kenney, his comments about he wants a new base, for example, he's drawing a division in between Albertans. And, there's no government solution of one size fits all. And these trampling of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that I personally see and experience, I don't understand, there seems to be such a lack of distrust of the public in general, the people who voted him in. He doesn't even seem to trust their ability to make a decision that's best for their families.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. We just see this over and over again, and like you mentioned, that's where this distrust has come from. Is the constantly changing the plan and having these businesses suffer so much, and we see lots of suffering out there, and we have to be able to explain things to people so that they can understand and get buy-in on some of these things. But at this point there's just no buy-in. There's people are frustrated. And that frustration doesn't help things at all. We need to have we see our mental health issues happening in this province, and there's so many effects that we need to be concerned about, and obviously all these changing goalposts and different things has caused a lot of issues all around.
Yeah, one of the examples I want to give, like Jason Kenney's comments on, when people now bring up Texas and Florida, for example, when I listen to his tweet and his comments on that, to me, it really just almost points out his failures. He's doing it to himself. He talks about how Texas, for example, has so many more beds available. Well, to me, that points back to our failure here with our public healthcare system, which, he's had 15 months to address. But we're not talking about those issues. And it sounds like he's not listening not only to the public, but to his own MLAs who want to discuss these issues.
Yeah, you know what? There's so many things that could have been changed and could have been made better. I mean, as caucus members, we've brought many things up that were dismissed, and of course, the Premier's reaction is quite often to dismiss and ridicule and redirect, and that's the problems we have. In order to build trust with Albertans, we need to be straight with them, and we need to be able to, the things we do have to make sense. They have people. If we come up with something and all of a sudden people just poke holes in it in the first 3 minutes, it's then there's no buy-in, there's no acceptance, and people just get frustrated.
So, Todd, where is Premier Kenney getting his information? Because I know, there was an open letter from Dr. Dennis Modry, Dr. Hodkinson. We've had Colonel Redman, retired. He's had plenty of opportunity to look at alternatives to how to deal with all of this. So, has he presented to caucus the information, the evidence, the proof to move down and do the measures that he's done?
We hear of, for the most part, all we hear about is the results of the recommendations from the chief medical officer. We don't often get the actual data and everything like that. They'll have charts and things like that they bring forward, but there's not that fulsome information that you're talking about. We're getting all our information from basically one person, from what I can understand, anyways, from what I see, and that's it. And so it's that's basically where the direction seems to come from. But of course, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors with the cabinet committee and the chief medical officer and the premier. So those are there's things discussed there, I'm sure, that I don't know at all. So I'm not sure how fulsome of discussions they're having there as far as accepting other advice and looking at other avenues.
Well, in all fairness, has Jason Kenney actually done anything right?
Well, of course, I think there's been some good things that this government has done, and I think we have to keep working on definitely some of the things we campaigned on and everything. But unfortunately, what's happened is with the trust that's been lost with some of these big issues that are really important to Albertans and important to Conservatives that have been failed on, and that's the issue. And again, it comes down to trust. And once that trust is lost, it's near impossible to rebuild. And I think we're in a serious trouble now. Of course, we don't want to lose the next election to the NDP. We want to make sure that we have a Conservative government, and it isn't about controlling and keeping power. It's about making sure that we have good policies brought forward after the next election, and before the next election too. So, and obviously the situation we're in right now, that the NDP would win the election if it was called right now. We have to wrestle that back out of their hands. We have to change something drastically to get things back on track, and I think the best thing that we can do right now is a change of leadership.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. 3 things that we should have done differently.
Well, obviously, I think we should have acted on some of the things that the Fair Deal panel recommended. Obviously, there's lots of things right there that we could have done. When I look back at things like the coal policy, for instance, we could have done more consultation there ahead of time, explained to Albertans why we were doing what we were doing. And instead, I think we let the narrative get out of control there. And then, I guess just want to look at things overall, as far as just the overall brush of how this government has operated under Jason Kenney. We just need to be listening more and be accepting more of other viewpoints and be able to express that to Albertans. Albertans are incredibly smart people, and they're hardworking and they're diligent, and they just want to know the facts, and they want to make decisions based on that.
Absolutely. So if you have anything you'd like to say to the good people of Alberta right now.
You know what? I think it's I think we need to change direction. That's obviously one of the main things, and obviously, Jason Kenney had an opportunity to have undergo a leadership review, and he could have done it this fall, but he chose to play political games and bump it back till the end of 2022, just before the next election. And that was a political move. It wasn't what's in the best interest of the party. It's what's in the best interest of Jason Kenney, and I think that's unacceptable to party members. I've hardly talked to any party members that accept that as the best thing for the party, and this needs to be changed, and that's why I asked for his resignation. Is that this action needs to happen fast, and we need to get back to rebuilding and make sure that we can bring government forward that Albertans deserve.
Yeah, it seems to be a lot of career politicians in particular that serve their own self-interests first, despite the people who've elected and voted for them and put their trust in their lives really in their hands.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I think again we got 4.4 million Albertans, and I know there's some incredibly intelligent, talented people out there that have really good views, really good ideas, and there's many that would be very good at governing this province. So I think we need to move on and get that process started.
Fantastic. I said we would keep this to 20 minutes and it's 25. So I apologize for the 5-minute sneak it in there. But thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And please do keep us informed, stay in touch, and hopefully we can do this again.
Okay, sounds good, Nadine. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, and have a great day.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.